Roswell, Alien Interview, Chapter 8, A Lesson in Recent History. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. This interview taught me a history lesson I will never read in any textbook written on Earth. The domain has a much different view of events than we do. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, 509th Bomb Group. Subject, Alien Interview, July 26, 1947, first session. The Domain Expeditionary Force has observed the resurgence in science and culture of the Western world since 1150 A.D. when the remaining remnants of the space fleet of the old empire in this solar system were destroyed. The influence of the remote control hypnosis operation diminished slightly after that time, but still remains largely in force. Apparently a small amount of damage was done to the old world remote mind control operation, which resulted in a small decrease in the power of this mechanism. As a result, some memory of technologies that ISBEs already knew before they came to Earth started to be remembered. Thereafter, the oppression of knowledge that is called the Dark Ages in Europe began to diminish after that time. Since then, the knowledge of the basic laws of physics and electricity have revolutionized Earth culture virtually overnight. The ability to remember technology by many of the geniuses in the ISBE population of Earth was partially restored, when not so actively suppressed as it was before 1150 A.D. Sir Isaac Newton is one of the best examples of this. In only a few decades, he single-handedly reinvented several major and fundamental scientific and mathematic principles. The men who remembered these sciences already knew them before they were sent to Earth. Ordinarily, no one would ever observe or discover as much about science and mathematics in a single lifetime or even a few hundred lifetimes. These subjects have taken civilians billions and billions of years to create. ISBEs on Earth have only just begun to remember small fragments of all the technologies that exist throughout the universe. Theoretically, if the amnesia mechanisms being used against Earth could be broken entirely, ISBEs would regain all their memory. Unfortunately, similar advances have not been seen in the humanities, as the ISBEs of Earth continue to behave very badly toward each other. This behavior, however, is heavily influenced by the hypnotic commands given to each ISBE between lifetimes, and the very unusual combination of inmates on Earth, criminals, perverts, artists, revolutionaries, and geniuses, is the cause of a very restive and tumultuous environment. The purpose of the prison planet is to keep ISBEs on Earth forever. Promoting ignorance, superstition, and war between ISBEs helps keep the prison population crippled and trapped behind the wall of electronic force screens. ISBEs have been dumped on Earth from all over the galaxy, adjoining galaxies, and from planetary systems all over the old empire, like Sirius, Aldebaran, the Pleiades, Orion, Draconis, and countless others. There are ISBEs on Earth from unnamed races, civilizations, cultural backgrounds, and planetary environments. Each of the various ISBE populations have their own language, belief systems, moral values, religious beliefs, training, and unknown and untold histories. These ISBEs are mixed together with earlier inhabitants of Earth who came from another star system more than 400,000 years ago to establish the civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria. Those civilizations vanished beneath the tidal waves caused by a planetary polar shift many thousands of years ago, before the current prison population started to arrive. Apparently, the ISBEs from those star systems were the source of the original Oriental races of Earth, beginning in Australia. On the other hand, the civilizations set up on Earth by the old Empire prison system were very different from the civilization of the old Empire itself, which is an electronic space opera, atomic-powered conglomeration of earlier civilizations that were conquered with nuclear weapons and colonized by ISBEs from another galaxy. The bureaucracy that controlled the former old empire was from an ancient space opera society run by a totalitarian confederation of planetary governments, regulated by a brutal social, economic, and political hierarchy, with a royal monarch as its figurehead. This type of government emerges with regularity on planets where the citizens abandon personal responsibility for autonomous self-regulation. They frequently lose their freedom to demented ISBEs who suffer from an overwhelming paranoia that every other ISBE is their enemy who must be controlled or destroyed. Their closest friends and allies, whom they espouse to love and cherish, are literally loved to death by them. Because such ISBEs exist, the domain has learned that freedom must be won and maintained through eternal vigilance and the ability to use defensive force to maintain it. As a result, the domain has already conquered the governing planet of the old empire. The civilization of the domain, although considerably younger and smaller in size, is already more powerful, better organized, and united by an egalitarian esprit de corps never known in the history of the old empire. The recently despoiled German totalitarian state on Earth was similar to the old empire, but not nearly as brutal, and about 10,000 times less powerful. Many of the ISBEs on Earth are here because they are violently opposed to the totalitarian government, or because they were so psychotically vicious that they could not be controlled by the old empire government. Consequently, the population of Earth is disproportionately comprised of a very high percentage of such beings. The conflicting cultural and ethical moral codes of the ISBEs on Earth is unusual in the extreme. The domain conquest of the central old empire planets was fought with electronic cannon. The citizens of the planet forming the core of government for the old empire are a filthy, degraded, slave society of mindless tax-paying workers who practice cannibalism. Violent automotive racetracks and bloody Roman circus-type entertainments are their only amusements. Regardless of any reasonable justification we may have had for using atomic weapons to vanquish the planets of the old empire, the domain is careful not to ruin the resources of those planets by using weapons of crude radioactive force. The current U.S. civilization is beginning to mimic some of the trappings of that civilization, especially in the design of airplanes, automobiles, ships, trains, and telephones. Likewise, buildings in the cities of Earth are thought to be modern or futuristic if their design resembles the architecture of the old empire. The government of the old empire, before being supplanted by the domain, was comprised of beings who possessed a very craven intelligence, very much like the Axis powers during your recent World War. Those beings manifested precisely the same behavior as the galactic government that exiled them to external imprisonment on Earth. They were a gruesome reminder of the ageless maxim that an ISBE will often manifest the treatment they have received from others. Kindness fosters kindness, cruelty begets cruelty. One must be able and willing to use force tempered with intelligence to prevent harm to the innocent. However, extraordinary understanding, self-discipline, and courage are required to effectively prevent brutality without being overwhelmed by the malice that motivated the brutality. Only a demonic, self-serving government would employ a logic or science to conceive that an ultimate solution to any problem is to murder and permanently erase the memory of every artist, genius, skilled manager, and inventor, and cast them into a planetary prison, together with political opponents, killers, thieves, perverts, and disabled beings of an entire galaxy. Once the ISBEs expelled from the old empire arrived on Earth, they were given amnesia and hypnotically tricked into thinking that something else had happened to them. The next step was to implant the ISBEs into biological bodies on Earth. The bodies became the human populations of false civilizations which were designed and installed in the minds of the ISBEs to look completely unlike the old empire. All of the ISBEs of India, Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Rome, and medieval Europe were guided to a pattern and build the cultural elements of these societies based on standard patterns developed by the ISBEs of many earlier similar civilizations on Sun-type 12 Class 7 planets that have existed for trillions of years throughout the universe. In the earliest times, the ISBEs sent to prison Earth lived in India. They gradually spread into Mesopotamia, Egypt, Mesoamerica, Archaea, Greece, Rome, medieval Europe, and to the New World. They were hypnotically commanded to follow the pattern of a given civilization by the old empire prison operators. This is an effective mechanism to disguise the actual time and location from the ISBEs imprisoned on Earth. The languages, customs, and culture of each false civilization are intended to reinforce amnesia because they do not remind the ISBEs on Earth of the original old empire planets from which they were deported. On the very far back track of time, these types of civilizations tended to repeat themselves over and over because the ISBEs who created them became familiar with certain patterns and styles and stayed with them. It is a lot of work to invent an entire civilization complete with culture, architecture, language, customs, mathematics, moral values, and so forth. It is much easier to replicate a copy based on a familiar and successful pattern. A Sun Type 12 Class 7 planet is the designation given to a planet inhabited by carbon-oxygen-based life forms. The class of the planet is based on the size and radiation intensity of the star, the distance of the planetary orbit from the star, and the size, density, and gravity and chemical composition of the planet. Likewise, flora and fauna are designated and identified according to the star type and class of the planet they inhabit. On the average, the percentage of planets in the physical universe with a breathable atmosphere is relatively small. Most planets do not have an atmosphere upon which life forms feed, as on Earth, where the chemical composition of the atmosphere provides nutrition to plants and other organisms which in turn support other life forms. When the domain force brought the Vedic hymns to the Himalayas region 8,200 years ago, some human societies already existed. The Aryan people invaded and conquered India, bringing the Vedic hymns to the area. The Vedas were learned by them, memorized, and carried forward verbally for 7,000 years before being committed to written form. During that span of time, one of the officers of the Domain Expeditionary Force was incarnated on Earth as a Vishnu. He is described many times in the Rig Veda. He is still considered to be a god by the Hindus. Vishnu fought in the religious wars against the old empire forces. He is a very able and aggressive Isbi, as well as a highly effective officer, who has since been reassigned to other duties in the domain. This entire episode was orchestrated as an attack and revolt against the Egyptian pantheon installed by old empire administrators. The conflict was intended to help free humankind from implanted elements of the false civilization that focused attention on many gods and superstitious ritual worship demanded by the priests who managed them. It is all part of the mental manipulation by the old empire to hide their criminal actions against the Isbis on Earth. A priesthood, or prison guards, were used to help reinforce the idea that an individual is only a biological body and is not an immortal spiritual being. The individual has no identity. The individuals have no past lives. The individual has no power. Only the gods have power, and the gods are the contrivance of the priests who intercede between men and the gods they serve. Men are slaves to the dictates of the priests who threaten eternal spiritual punishment if men do not obey them. What else would one expect on a prison planet where all the prisoners have amnesia and the priests themselves are prisoners? The intervention of the domain force on Earth has not been entirely successful due to the secret mind control operation of the old empire that still continues to operate. A battle was waged between the old empire forces and the domain through religious conquest between 1500 BCE and about 1200 BCE. The domain forces attempted to teach the concept of an individual, immortal spiritual being to several influential beings on Earth. One such instance resulted in a very tragic misunderstanding, misinterpretation, and misapplication of the concept. The idea was perverted and applied to mean that there is only one Isbi instead of the truth that everyone is an Isbi. Obviously, this was a gross incomprehension and an utter unwillingness to take responsibility for one's own power. The old empire priests managed to corrupt the concept of the individual immortality into the idea that there is only one all-powerful Isbi and that no one else is or is allowed to be an Isbi. Obviously, this is the work of the old empire amnesia operation. It is easy to teach this altered notion to beings who do not want to be responsible for their own lives. Slaves are such beings. As long as one chooses to assign responsibility for creation, existence, and personal accountability for one's own thoughts and actions to others, one is a slave. As a result, the concept of a single monotheistic God resulted and was promoted by many self-proclaimed prophets such as the Jewish slave leader Moses, who grew up in the household of the Pharaoh Amenhotep III, and his son Akhenaten, and his wife Nefertiti, as well as his son Tutankhamun. As a result, the concept of a single monotheistic God resulted and was promoted by many self-proclaimed prophets, such as the Jewish slave leader Moses, who grew up in the household of the Pharaoh Amenhotep III, and his son Akhenaten, and his wife Nefertiti, as well as his son Tutankhamun. The attempt to teach certain beings on earth the truth that they are themselves Isbis was part of a plan to overthrow the fictional, metaphorical, anthropomorphic panoply of gods created by the old empire mystery cult called the Brothers of the Serpent, known in Egypt as the Priests of Amun. They were a very ancient secret society within the old empire. The Pharaoh, Akhenaten, was not a very intelligent being and was heavily influenced by his personal ambition for self-glorification. He altered the concept of the individual spiritual being and embedded the concept in the sun god Aten. His pitiful existence was soon ended. He was assassinated by Maya and Paranepher, two of the priests of Amun, or Amen, which the Christians still say, who represented the interests of the old empire forces. The idea of one God was perpetuated by the hero leader Moses while he was in Egypt. He left Egypt with his adopted people, the Jewish slaves. While they were crossing the desert, Moses was intercepted by an operative of the old empire near Mount Sinai. Moses was tricked into believing that this operative was the one God through the use of hypnotic commands, as well as technical and aesthetic tricks, which are commonly used by the old empire to trap Isbis. Thereafter, the Jewish slaves who trusted the word of Moses implicitly have worshipped a single God they call Yahweh. The name Yahweh means anonymous, as the Isbi who worked with Moses could not use an actual name or anything that would identify himself or blow the cover of the amnesia prison operation. The last thing the covert amnesia hypnosis prison system wants to do is reveal themselves openly to the Isbis on earth. They feel that this would restore the inmates' memories. This is the reason that all traces of physical encounters between operatives of space civilizations and humans is very carefully hidden, disguised, covered up, denied, or misdirected. This old empire operative contacted Moses on a desert mountaintop and delivered the 10 hypnotic commands to him. These commands are very forcefully worded and compel the Isbi into utter subservience to the will of the operator. These hypnotic commands are still in effect and influence the thought patterns of millions of Isbis thousands of years later. Incidentally, we later discovered that the so-called Yahweh also wrote, programmed, and encoded the text of the Torah, which, when it is read literally or in its decoded form, will provide a great deal of more false information to those who read it. Ultimately, the Vedic hymns became the source of nearly all Eastern religions and were the philosophical source of the ideas common to Buddha, Laozi, Zoroaster, and other philosophers. The civilizing influences of these philosophies eventually replaced the brutal idolatry of the old empire religions and were the true genius of kindness and compassion. You asked me earlier why the domain and other space civilizations do not land on Earth or make their presence known. Land on Earth? Do you think we are crazy or want to be crazy? It takes a very brave Isbi to come down through the atmosphere and land on Earth because this is a prison planet with a very uncontrolled psychotic population, and no Isbi is entirely proof against the risk of entrapment, as with the members of the Domain Expeditionary Force who were captured in the Himalayas 8,200 years ago. No one knows what Isbis on Earth are going to do. We are not scheduled to invest the resources of the domain to take control of all the space surrounding the area at this time. This will occur in the not-too-distant future, about 5,000 Earth years, according to the time schedule of the domain. At this time, we do not prevent transports from other planetary systems or galaxies from continuing to drop Isbis into the amnesia force screen area. Eventually, this will change. In addition, Earth inherently is a highly unstable planet. It is not suitable for settlement or permanent habitation for any sustainable civilization. This is part of the reason why it is being used as a prison planet, No one else would seriously consider living here for a variety of simple and compelling reasons. 1. The continental landmasses of Earth are floating on a sea of molten lava beneath the surface, which causes the landmasses to crack, crumble, and drift continually. 2. Because of the liquid nature of the core, the planet is largely volcanic and subject to earthquakes and volcanic explosions. 3. The magnetic poles of the planet shift radically about once every 20,000 years. This causes a greater or lesser degree of devastation as a result of tidal waves and climate changes. 4. Earth is very distant from the center of the galaxy and from any other significant galactic civilization. This isolation makes it unsuitable for use except as a pit stop or jumping off point along the way between galaxies. The moon and asteroids are far more suitable for this purpose because they do not have any significant gravity. 5. Earth is a heavy gravity planet with heavy metallic soil and a dense atmosphere. This makes it treacherous for navigational purposes. The fact that I am in this room as a result of an in-flight accident, in spite of the technology of my craft and my extensive expertise as a pilot, are proof of these facts. 6. There are approximately 60 billion Earth-like Sun-type 12 Class 7 planets in the Milky Way galaxy alone, not to mention the vast expanses of the domain and the territories we claim in the future. It is difficult to stretch our resources to do much more than a periodic reconnaissance of Earth, especially when there are no immediate advantages to invest resources here. On Earth, most beings are not aware that they are Isbis, or that there are spirits of any kind. Many other beings are aware of this, but nearly everyone has very limited understanding of themselves as an Isbi. One of the reasons for this is that Isbis have been waging war against each other since the beginning of time. The purpose of these wars has always been to establish domination by one Isbi or group of Isbis over another. Since an Isbi cannot be killed, the objective has been to capture and immobilize Isbis. This has been done in a nearly unlimited variety of ways. The most basic method to capture and immobilize an Isbi is through the use of various kinds of traps. Isbi traps have been made and put in place by many invading societies, such as the one that established the old empire beginning about 64 trillion years ago. Traps are often set up in the territory of the Isbis being attacked. Usually a trap is set up with the electronic wave of beauty to attract the interest and attention of the Isbi. When the Isbi moves toward the source of the aesthetic wave, such as a beautiful building or beautiful music, the trap is activated by the energy put out by the Isbi. One of the most common trap mechanisms uses the Isbi's own thought energy output when the Isbi tries to attack or fight back against the trap. The trap is activated and energized by the Isbi's own thought energy. The harder the Isbi fights against the trap, the more it pulls the Isbi toward it and keeps them stuck in the trap. Throughout the entire history of this physical universe, vast areas of space have been taken over and colonized by Isbi societies who invade and take over new areas of space in this fashion. In the past, these invasions have always shared common elements. 1. The overwhelming use of force of arms, usually with nuclear or electronic weapons. 2. Mind control of the Isbis in the invaded area through the use of electroshock, drugs, hypnosis, erasure of memory, and the implantation of false memory or false information intended to subjugate and enslave the local Isbi population. 3. Takeover of natural resources by the invading Isbis. 4. Political, economic, and social slavery of the local population. These activities continue in present time. All of the Isbis on Earth have been members of one or more of these activities in the past, both as an invader or as part of the population being invaded. There are no saints in this universe. Very few have avoided or been exempted from warfare between Isbis. Isbis on Earth are still the victims of this activity at this very moment. The Between Lives amnesia administered to Isbis is one of the mechanisms of an elaborate system of old-world Isbi traps that prevent an Isbi from escaping. This operation is managed by an illicit, renegade secret police force of the old empire using false provocation operations to disguise their activities in order to prevent detection by their own government, the domain, and by the victims of their activities. They are mind control methods developed by government psychiatrists. Earth is a ghetto planet. It is the result of an intergalactic holocaust. ISBs have been sentenced to Earth either because 1. They are too viciously insane or perverse to function as part of any civilization, no matter how degraded or corrupt. 2. Or they may be a revolutionary threat to the social, economic, and political caste system that has been so carefully built and brutally enforced in the old empire. Biological bodies are specifically designed as the lowest order of the entity of the old empire caste system. When an ISB is sent to Earth and then tricked or coerced into operating in a biological body, they are actually in a prison inside a prison. 3. In an effort to permanently and irreversibly rid the old empire of such untouchables, the external identity, memory, and abilities of every ISB is forcefully erased. This final solution was conceived and carried out by the psychopathic criminals who are controlled by the old empire. The mass extermination of untouchables in prison camps created by Germany during World War II were recently revealed. Likewise, the ISBs of Earth are the victims of spiritual eradication and eternal slavery inside frail biological bodies inspired by the same kind of craven hatred in the old empire. The kind and creative inmates of Earth are continuously tortured by butchers and lunatics who are controlled by the old empire prison operators. The so-called civilizations of Earth, far from the age of useless pyramids to the age of nuclear holocaust, have been a colossal waste of natural resources, a perverted use of intelligence, and an overt oppression of the spiritual essence of every single ISB on the planet. If the domain sent ships to every corner of the universe in search of hell, their quest could end on Earth. What greater brutality can be inflicted on anyone than to erase the spiritual awareness, identity, ability, and memory that is in the essence of oneself? The domain has as yet been unable to rescue the 3,000 ISBs of the Expeditionary Force Battalion either. They are forced to inhabit biological bodies on Earth. We have been able to recognize and track most of them for the past 8,000 years. However, our attempts to communicate with them are usually futile, as they are unable to remember their true identity. The majority of lost members of the domain force have followed the general progression of Western civilization from India into the Middle East, then to Chaldea and Babylon, into Egypt, through Achaia, Greece, Rome, into Europe, to the Western Hemisphere, and then around the world. The members of the Lost Battalion and many other ISBs on Earth could be valuable citizens of the domain, not including those who are vicious criminals or perverts. Unfortunately, there has been no workable method conceived to emancipate the ISBs from Earth. Therefore, as a matter of common logic as well as the official policy of the domain, it is safer and more sensible to avoid contact with the ISB population of Earth until such time as the proper resources can be allocated to locate and destroy the old Empire force screen and amnesia machinery and develop a therapy to restore the memory of an ISB.